I stood in my father's office at Winters Care Facilities headquarters, gripping the back of the leather chair, until my knuckles turned white. The education fund I'd been promised to help with law school money I'd spent years saving and that my father had agreed to match, gone just like that. My younger brother Victor lounged against the mahogany desk, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth as he scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging the life-altering conversation happening around him. "Eliza, sweetheart, try to be reasonable," my mother Patricia said, her perfectly manicured hands clasped in front of her crisp blouse. "The family business needs that money right now. Your brother has such promising ideas for facility expansion. The elder care market is booming." I'm Eliza Winters, and at 29 I was learning exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy again. The familiar sting of disappointment burned in my chest, sharper this time because I'd foolishly allowed myself to hope things might be different. Promising ideas. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice as I gestured toward Victor, like the luxury care wing that lost $750,000 in 8 months, or the wellness center that sits empty because no one bothered to research what our residents actually wanted. Those were learning experiences. Victor cut in, straightening his designer tie as he finally looked up from his phone. "Dad and Mom understand the value of taking calculated risks in business. That's how we grow." My father Douglas raised his hand, silencing us both with the practiced authority of a man who'd built an empire from scratch. The lines around his eyes had deepened since I'd last been in this room. "Eliza, we've discussed this already. Law school is an interesting whim, but it's not a practical career choice for someone with your background in elder care. The money will be better utilized supporting your brother's expansion projects." He turned to his computer, typing something as if the matter were already settled. "Your nursing expertise is valuable to us here. Law is unnecessary." Whim. The word felt like acid on my tongue, burn with the same familiar pain I'd felt whenever my career aspirations were dismissed. I've worked as a caregiver for 7 years while putting myself through college. I graduated with honors. I've already been accepted to the evening law program, which is very impressive. Dear mother, interrupted her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "But really, when was the last time you saw a woman from our circle changing careers at your age, and to become a lawyer of all things? It's simply not the path for someone like you." I looked between them, mother with her concerned frown that masked her determination to maintain appearances. Father focused on his laptop screen as if the family's care facilities were the only thing that mattered, and Victor, wearing that insufferable grin he perfected since childhood. The same scene had played out countless times throughout my life. Victor's mediocre performance reviews earned praise and promotions, while my innovative care protocols were met with polite disinterest. His failed facility expansions were learning experiences, while my concerns about patient care were dismissed as being too emotional. "Half of this money is mine," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady as I pointed to the financial documents on the desk. "I saved for 3 years working double shifts at Memorial Gardens while handling a full patient load. You promised to match it for my education, and as the head of this family and CEO of this company, I have the right to determine how our resources are best used," father replied without looking up. "The decision is final. The legal issues at the North Ridge facility need to be addressed immediately." My hands shook as I grabbed my tote bag from the floor. "You know what? Keep the money. I've gotten this far on my own, and I'll figure out the rest myself." "Don't be so dramatic, Eliza," mother sighed, crossing the room to place a hand on my arm that I immediately shrugged off. "Why don't you help Victor implement the new care protocols at the East Side facility? You've always had such a good eye for patient needs. That's where your talents truly lie." I stopped at the door, my heart pounding. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about the money anymore. This is about you never believing in me, never taking my concerns about the facilities seriously." Victor laughed, the sound grating on my already fray nerves. "Come on, sis, don't make this into one of your emotional crusades. We're running a business here, not a charity." "Emotional crusades?" I spun around, the fury I'd been suppressing finally breaking through. "Like when I warned you about understaffing at Northside and you ignored me until that patient fell and broke her hip, or when I documented the medication errors at 3 facilities, and you buried the report those emotional crusades could have prevented. Lawsuits if anyone had listened. That's enough. Father's voice boomed through the office, his face wrying as he stood. Eliza, you're upset and not thinking clearly. Go home, calm down, and we'll discuss this when you're being more rational. There's nothing to discuss. I pulled open the heavy glass door. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done watching you hand everything to Victor while I fight to be heard about issues that affect real people's lives. I'm going to law school and I'm going to succeed without your money and without your validation. Eliza, mother started, her voice rising with alarm, but I was already walking away. My shoes clicked against the polished floors of our family's flagship facility, past the reception area with its tasteful decor that masked the corners being cut in actual patient care for what I knew would be the last time I walked these halls, not as an employee but as someone who had finally seen the truth. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not where the staff who respected my work might see. My phone buzzed as I reached my car in the executive parking lot. A text from Meredith, my best friend since nursing school. How'd the meeting go? Still on for coffee. I typed back quickly, there giving my education fund to Victor to fix his latest disaster. Meeting in 30 at Blackbird Cafe. The response was immediate. Those entitled jerks. I'll be there with emergency chocolate and loon paperwork options. Starting my car, I caught movement in the office window. Victor stood there watching me with that same smug expression that said he'd won again. I held his gaze for a moment, letting him see the determination in my eyes, then pulled away from the facility that had been my workplace but never my passion. They thought denying me this money would force me to give up on law school, to fall in line with their narrow vision of my future. They thought I'd cave and accept the comfortable, confined life they'd planned for me as the family's reliable caregiver who never made waves. They were wrong. I didn't know it then, but that day marked the beginning of something bigger than my dream of becoming a lawyer specialized in elder care law. It was the day I stopped being the dutiful daughter who sought their approval and started becoming someone they would one day need to reckon with. Let them laugh, let them dismiss my concerns, let them think they'd won. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my resolve hardening with each mile between me and that suffocating building. They had no idea what I was capable of, how the very knowledge of elder care that they dismissed would become my greatest strength. But they would learn. Oh, they would learn. 6 months later, another overnight shift. Meredith raised her eyebrows as I changed from my scrubs into a fresh uniform in the cramped break room of Sunrise Elder Living, the small independently owned facility where I'd been working since leaving my family's business. Eliza, you're going to collapse before classes even start. This is your 3rd double shift this week, she said, passing me a coffee from the cardboard tray she brought in. Can't afford to collapse, I said, gratefully accepting the coffee and tying my hair back. Law school tuition isn't going to pay itself, and these student loan applications won't cover everything. 6 months had passed since I'd walked out of my family's care facility empire. 6 months of working longer shifts at a smaller facility with better patient care standards, living on caffeine and determination, and sleeping in my small but private apartment where every piece of furniture had been carefully budgeted. For every extra dollar I earned went straight into my law school fund. At least let me bring you dinner tonight, Meredith insisted, looking me over with concern. You've lost weight and those circles under your eyes have circles. When was the last time you ate something that didn't come from a vending machine? Before I could argue, Denise, the head nurse, appeared in the doorway. Eliza, Mrs. Hernandez in room 14 is asking for you specifically about her medication questions, and there's a well-dressed man at the front desk asking to speak with you. Says he's an attorney who handles medical malpractice cases. I froze, almost spilling my coffee. At Sunrise Elder Living attorney. His name is Nathaniel Blackwood. He's been here twice before, talking with some of the families about care standards in the area. I knew exactly who she meant. Nathaniel Blackwood had founded one of the city's most respected medical malpractice law firms and had been investigating a series of complaints against several larger elder care chains, including, though he didn't know it yet, my family's business. He'd spoken with me briefly during his previous visits, impressed by my detailed knowledge of care protocols and Regulations go. Meredith nudged me, taking the clipboard from my hands. I'll check on Mrs. Hernandez's medications. This could be your chance. I found Nathaniel in the small but bright visitors' lounge reviewing documents spread across the table. He looked up as I approached, his expression brightening with recognition. Eliza, good to see you again. Hope I'm not interrupting your shift. He gestured to the chair across from him. Do you have a moment, Mr. Blackwood? I nodded, smoothing my uniform as I sat down, suddenly conscious of how tired I must look after back-to-back shifts. Nathaniel, please, he corrected with a warm smile, then reached into his briefcase. Actually, I have something for you. He slid a folder across the table. It's an opportunity one think might interest you. Inside was an offer letter for a paid paralegal position at his firm, specifically focused on elder care cases. My hands trembled slightly as I read through the details, a flutter of excitement rising in my chest. It's part-time, he explained, watching my reaction carefully. Flexible hours to accommodate your law school schedule. Better compensation than elder care work, plus it'll provide valuable experience that will strengthen your law school performance and future career options. I don't understand, I said, looking up from the letter. Why me? You barely know me. Because in our conversations about care standards you showed more insight into both the medical and potential legal issues than most practiced attorneys I know, he replied, leaning forward. You remind me of myself 20 years ago, determined, knowledgeable, and fighting uphill. Plus, he added with a slight hesitation, Meredith mentioned something about your family situation. Meredith did what? I glanced toward the nurse's station where my friend was suddenly very absorbed in medication charts. Don't be upset with her, Nathaniel said, catching my expression. She was genuinely concerned. Look, Eliza, I've been impressed watching you handle complex care situations while preparing for a career change into law. That combination of expertise and dedication is exactly what my firm needs for these elder abuse cases we're investigating. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I don't want special treatment or charity. I need to make it on my own merits. He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Trust me, with the caseload we're facing, you'll earn every penny. This isn't charity, Eliza, it's recognition of a unique skill set. We need someone who understands both elder care and legal concepts. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Victor Winters flashed on the screen. I declined the call with a quick swipe. Family? Nathaniel asked perceptively. They reach out occasionally, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Usually when they need something or want to remind me how disappointed they are in my career choices. I stopped answering about 4 months ago. Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. You know, I found that becoming successful on your own terms is the most effective response to family doubts. He stood, gathering his remaining papers. Think about the offer. The position would start next month, after you've had time to arrange your schedule with the facility here. After he left, Meredith practically ambushed me at the medication cart. Well, what did he say? Did you take it? Her eyes were bright with excitement. I haven't decided yet, I admitted, showing her the offer letter, but it's more money for fewer hours than what I'm making here, and the experience would be invaluable. Then what's holding you back? She searched my face and seemed to find the answer. Oh, come on, Eliza. Don't tell me you're worried you're not qualified enough. What if I'm not ready? What if I make a fool of myself? I don't have any legal experience. Stop right there. Meredith gripped my shoulders firmly. You are the most intelligent, hardworking person I know. You've been studying elder care law on your own for years. You handled that difficult family situation last month better than the facility's legal counsel did. You've survived 6 months without taking a dime from your family's money. You are absolutely ready for this. My phone vibrated again, this time with a text from Victor. Dad's blood pressure is up again because you missed the family dinner. Stop being so stubborn and think about someone besides yourself for once. Meredith read the message over my shoulder and made a disgusted sound. Stubborn? That's rich. Come from the guy who ignored your warnings about staffing levels until they got sued. I deleted the message without responding, feeling the familiar mix of anger and guilt. My family always managed to trigger you. Know what I said, squaring my shoulders. You're right, I'm taking the position. Yes. Meredith hugged me tightly, nearly knocking over the medication cart. This calls for celebration. Pizza and wine at my place after your Shift can't, I groaned, remembering my schedule. I have a study group for my LSAT prep course at 7 a.m. tomorrow, then no more excuses after that, she insisted, pointing to the offer letter still in my hand. This is your turning point, Eliza. Everything changes from here. Looking at the letter again, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest that I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine hope. Maybe Meredith was right. Maybe this was the beginning of the path I'd been searching for. That night, as I helped Mrs. Hernandez settle in for the evening, I imagined Victor's face when he eventually learned I'd made it through law school without our family's money or connections. I pictured my parents' expressions when they realized their impractical, emotional daughter had succeeded despite their faith in her abilities. My phone vibrated one final time as I was clocking out. Mother, darling, please be sensible. Your father's health isn't good. Come home and we can discuss alternatives to this law school fixation. The East Side facility needs your nursing expertise. I blocked the number without hesitation, feeling a strange sense of lightness as I did. There would be no more discussions, no more alternatives, no more seeking their approval for my life choices. I had found my own path now, and for the first time in years I was certain it was the right one. Tomorrow I would accept Nathaniel's offer. Tomorrow I would take another step toward proving that my concerns about elder care were valid and important. Tomorrow the real work toward becoming an advocate for the vulnerable would begin. For years later, the day I passed the bar exam, Nathaniel called me into his office. 4 years of night law school, countless sleep-deprived days, and an unhealthy relationship with caffeine had led to this moment. Close the door, Eliza. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, his expression unreadable. I've just received some news. My heart pounded against my ribs. I'd been working as a paralegal at his firm throughout law school, gradually taking on more responsibility with each passing year, hoping to secure an associate position after passing the bar. The partners met this morning, he said, shuffling through some papers on his immaculate desk. We've made our decision about the new associate position. He looked up, his expression serious, then a smile broke across his face. Welcome to the firm as our newest attorney. Counselor, I collapsed into the chair, relief and pride washing over me in equal measure. Top of your class in elder law, excellent recommendations from the clinic supervisors, and 4 years of practical experience with us already. It wasn't even a difficult decision. He slid a contract across the desk. Your starting salary and benefits package are all detailed here. Take it home, review it, and let me know if you have any questions. My hands trembled slightly lightly as I looked at the numbers. It was more money than I'd ever expected to make. Thank you, Nathaniel, for everything you earned this. Eliza, he said firmly, every bit of it. No one handed you anything. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a news alert. Winters Care Facilities faces multiple lawsuits. CEO under investigation. Nathaniel noticed my expression change. Everything okay? I turned my phone toward him, showing the headline, my family's company. It's finally happening. He leaned forward, quickly scanning the article. Allegations of patient neglect, medication errors, fraudulent billing practices. This is serious, Eliza. The state health department is involved now. In my office, I couldn't help but feel a twist of satisfaction. Sharp and sweet. Guess those promising ideas for facility expansion finally caught up with him. Your family might need a good attorney, Nathaniel observed, studying my face. Someone who understands both health care regulations and legal implications. They're not my problem anymore. I stood up carefully, tucking the contract into my leather portfolio. The one I bought myself after my first big case was when I haven't spoken to them in for years, not since they made it clear my concerns about patient care weren't worth their time. Back at my desk, I was sorting through case files when Meredith's name flashed on my phone. She joined the state's health department legal team last year, but we still met for our sacred weekly coffee dates. Did you see the breaking news? She asked without preamble about Winters Care Facilities. It's all over the health care blogs. Yeah, my brother's really done it. This time, I replied, leaning back in my chair. The state health department investigation is just the beginning. There's talk of a class action suit from families. I know, not your battle to fight, not your responsibility, Meredith said. But Eliza, this is pure karmic justice. They took your education, Money to fund Victor's expansion projects ignored all your warnings about understaffing and care standards, and now the whole house of cards is collapsing before I could respond. My assistant Amber knocked on my door frame. Miss Winters, there's a Mr. Victor Winters in reception insisting on seeing you. Claims he's your brother. He doesn't have an appointment. Should I send him away? My blood ran cold as I glanced through the glass walls of my office. There he was, standing awkwardly in our reception area, looking nothing like the confidently smug brother I remembered. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and the constant checking of his phone betrayed his anxiety. Eliza, hello, are you still there? Meredith's voice came through the phone. What are you going to do? I'll call you back, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I hung up and nodded to Amber. Send him in, please, and hold my calls for the next 30 minutes. Victor entered my office like a shadow of his former self, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous hesitancy I'd never seen in him before. Hey sis, he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. What do you want? Victor the first remained standing, unwilling to give him the comfort of a casual family chat. Can't a brother visit his successful sister? He attempted his trademark charming smile, but it collapsed into something more like a grimace. Nice office partner track I hear. Cut the small talk. I saw the news. I gestured to my computer screen where the article about Winter's Care Facilities was still open. So what brings the golden child of Winter's Care to my door? After 4 years of silence, he collapsed into one of my client chairs, suddenly looking 10 years older. It's bad, Eliza, really bad. Dad's having serious heart problems from the stress. His doctor talking about bypass surgery. Mom's barely holding it together, and the state investigators are interviewing all our staff. 3 facilities might lose their licenses, and this concerns me. How? I asked, my voice cooled though my heart constricted at the news about my father's health. We need your help, your expertise in both health care and law. The family attorneys are corporate specialists with no background in elder care or medical malpractice. They're completely out of their depth with these allegations. I couldn't help but laugh. The sound harsh even to my own ears. You must be truly desperate if you're coming to me, the emotional, impractical daughter who was too concerned about actual patient care to be trusted with the family business. I know we treated you terribly. His voice cracked as he looked down at his hands. I know we dismissed your concerns and didn't support your career change, but please, Eliza, the facilities will close without expert help. Faisal facilities, where hundreds of seniors live, where over 1,000 people work. The same facilities you ran into the ground by ignoring every warning I gave you about staffing levels and care protocols. The warnings that cost me my education fund because I was being difficult. My voice was sharp with 4 years of accumulated bitterness. He flinched visibly. I deserve that, all of it, but this isn't just about me or even about Dad's legacy anymore. It's about the residents who have nowhere else to go if we close, the staff who depend on these jobs, the families who trust us with their loved ones. I turned away, walking to the window that overlooked the city below. People hurried along the sidewalks, each with their own stories, their own struggles. It struck me how far I'd come from that frustrated caregiver in my father's office, silenced and dismissed whenever I raised concerns about patient welfare. Please, Eliza. Victor's voice was barely above a whisper. Now name your price. Anything we need you. I turned back to face him, years of hurt and anger crystallizing into something harder, more purposeful. My price? Oh, Victor, you have no idea what this is going to cost you. He looked up, hope and fear wearing in his eyes. Does that mean you'll help us? I'll think about it, I said, finally walking to my door and holding it open. Tell Mom and Dad I'll be in touch with my terms, and Victor, be prepared for them to be non-negotiable. After he left, I immediately called Nathaniel's extension. Remember what you said about them potentially needing a good lawyer with health care knowledge? Well, you were right, and I think it's time for a long overdue family intervention. The family home, the family estate, looked exactly the same, from the manicured lawns to the pretentious lion statues flanking the entrance. Only this time I wasn't arriving as the disappointing daughter who couldn't understand business realities. I was here as their last hope, a qualified attorney with specialized knowledge in exactly the crisis they were facing. Meredith had helped me prepare for this moment with mock Negotiations lasting late into the night. Remember, she insisted you hold all the cards. Now don't let them manipulate you with family guilt or emotional appeals. I straightened my tailored suit bought with my first bonus from the law firm and rang the doorbell. Our long-time housekeeper Rosa answered, her familiar face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Miss Eliza, her warm hands clasped mine. It's so wonderful to see you again. You too, Rosa, I said, returning her brief hug. Are they waiting in the study? Yes, all of them. Your father? Her voice dropped. He's not doing well, Miss Eliza. The situation has been very hard on his heart. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral as I walked the familiar path through the house I'd grown up in. For years ago I'd left this place with tears of frustration burning in my eyes. Today I entered the study with my shoulders back and head high. They were arranged exactly as I had expected, father looking frier and older behind his desk like a king with a crumbling kingdom, mother perched anxiously on the leather sofa, every hair in place despite the crisis, and Victor pacing by the window, unable to contain his nervous energy. Eliza, mother rose immediately, arms outstretched, her voice trembling with relief. Darling, you look so. Let's skip the reunion pleasantries, I interrupted, setting my briefcase on the edge of the desk. I've reviewed the state health department allegations and your facial compliance records. You're in deeper trouble than the news is reporting. Father's face tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening. We're aware of the seriousness of the situation. Are you really? I pulled out a stack of documents, spreading them methodically across his desk, because according to these records, Victor didn't just mismanage staffing and care protocols. There's evidence of deliberate falsification of patient records and fraudulent Medicare billing. We're talking potential criminal charges, not just civil penalties and license revocation. Criminal charges, mother gasped, one manicured hand flying to her throat. But surely you can fix this, Eliza. You're a lawyer now, specializing in exactly these issues. I'm not just any lawyer, mother, I said, letting my gaze move between them. I'm one of the top associates at Blackwood Law Group, specializing in elder law and medical malpractice with a focus on facility compliance. I paused, letting that sink in. The same firm that's currently representing 3 families in cases against large elder care chains were similar violations. Victor stopped his pacing, turning to face me fully. So will you help us at my office? That depends. I took a seat in the chair across from father, placing my portfolio precisely on the desk between us. What exactly are you asking for? We need you to defend Victor, father said, his voice weakened by stress and illness, a shadow of the commanding tone I remembered. Handle the health department investigation, address the patient complaints, restructure the facial operations, preserve what's left of our reputation, save your empire. I finished for him, unable to keep a hint of irony from my voice. That's quite a tall order, considering you didn't even think I was capable of completing law school while working full-time. Mother flinched visibly, her carefully maintained composure cracking. Eliza, please, that was a long time ago. We were mistaken for years. I met her gay, steadily refusing to let her look away. For years, since you diverted my education fund to Victor's facility expansion projects. How much of that money actually benefited patient care? By the way, Victor looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. None of it, right? I nodded, unsurprised. You used it to build that luxury wing that stands half empty, to install amenities that look good in brochures but don't actually improve care outcomes. I opened my laptop, typing my password with deliberate precision. Well, here's my idea. I'll take your case, but I have conditions. Father leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly. Name them. First, I want complete control of both the legal strategy and the care protocol revisions. No interference from your corporate attorneys or administrators who don't understand elder care regulations. Second, my firm's standard fees are non-negotiable. This won't be pro bono work just because we're family. And third, I paused, letting the moment stretch, watching their faces. I want controlling interest in the facility's operations and a position as chief compliance officer with authority over all care standards. Absolutely not. Father's fist came down on the desk, then he immediately winced, clutching at his chest. Douglas, mother rushed to his side, her voice tight with fear. Your heart take Your medication, it's not a request, it's a requirement, I continued calmly as mother fumbled with a pill bottle from father's pocket. The facilities need new leadership, someone who understands both healthcare regulations and legal compliance, someone who can rebuild trust with patients, families, and regulators. You can't be serious. Eliza. Victor finally found his voice, half rising from his chair. You want to take control of the business based on what business experience? Think of it as poetic justice. Brother dear, I replied with a cool smile, you got my education fund to expand facilities you didn't properly staff. I get to fix the mess you created. I stood up, gathering my materials with unhurried movements. Those are my terms, accept them. Or find another attorney who specializes in both healthcare regulations and elder law, who's willing to risk their professional reputation defending your case. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Victor's accusation came out half angry, half pleading, watching us struggle after everything. No more than you enjoyed dismissing my concerns while patients received substandard care, I replied evenly. You have 4 hours to decide. After that, I have other cases requiring my attention. Wait, father called out as I reached the door, his breathing labored but his eyes sharp. What makes you think you can save these facilities when you've never managed healthcare operations at this scale? I turned back, meeting his gaze directly, because unlike Victor, the first actually understand what quality care requires. I've built my career from the ground up, starting as a direct caregiver while he was ignoring the warning signs I pointed out years ago. So yes, I can save the facilities, but only if I have the authority to implement the necessary changes. We need time to discuss this as a family, mother said quietly, her hands still resting on father's shoulder. 24 hours, I repeated firmly. Oh, and Victor, I'd recommend against destroying any more documentation. The state investigators are particularly interested in those medication error reports that mysteriously disappeared from 3 facilities. His face blanched. How did you know about? I'm very good at my job. I cut him off. Something you might want to consider when making your decision. I left them there in the study that had once been the center of family power, now heavy with the weight of their desperation. As I walked down the long hallway toward the front door, I heard mother's hurried footsteps behind me. Eliza, please, she called, her voice strained. Can't we discuss this more as a family? I kept walking, my footsteps steady and determined. They'd had 4 years to listen to my concerns about patient care. Now it was my turn to set the terms, and they would have to accept them or watch their legacy crumble completely. The next day, 23 hours and 45 minutes later, my office phone rang. I checked the caller ID, then activated the speakerphone. We accept your terms, father said without preamble, his voice strained but resolute. But we have conditions of our own. This isn't a negotiation, I replied, a flicker of disappointment but not surprise passing through me. Hear me out, he requested, pausing as I heard him taking a shaky breath. We want you to mentor Victor in proper facility management and regulatory compliance. Help him understand where he went wrong, teach him to do better. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So after everything, you still don't trust me to run things without him involved? That's not what I want. Meeting in my office in 1 hour, I cut him off, my voice crisp and professional. Bring the operational authority agreement and Victor's resignation letter from his current position. Nathaniel knocked lightly on my doorframe. As I hung up, his expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. They took the terms just as you anticipated. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile, ready to help me play hardball with my family. I've been waiting 4 years to see you take your rightful place, he replied, checking his watch. Let's review the strategy before they arrive. An hour later, my family filed into the conference room at Blackwood Law Group. Victor looked like he hadn't slept in days, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. Mother's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her red-rimmed eyes. And father looked old and defeated in a way I'd never seen before. Before we started, I said, taking my place at the head of the conference table, I want to make something very clear. This is not a family meeting. This is a business transaction between Blackwood Law Group and Winters Care Facilities. Eliza, please, mother began. Reaching toward me, Mrs. Winters. Nathaniel interrupted smoothly from beside me as Your daughter's senior colleague, I strongly advise you to approach this as the professional arrangement it is. I slid the contracts across the polished table surface. Everything is laid out. Here I assume operational control and compliance oversight of all facilities. Immediately Victor steps down as Chief Operating Officer but remains on the board in a non-executive advisory capacity. I will direct all aspects of the regulatory response and facility reforms. And what about the state investigation and lawsuits? Victor asked, flipping through the documents. I've already spoken with some of the families. I pulled out another folder. We've drafted a comprehensive settlement framework, but it won't be inexpensive. The facilities will need to establish a patient compensation fund. And you'll need to cooperate fully with all investigations, including testifying about past practices if required. Father scanned the paper, ears his brow, furrowing. These terms, they're extremely favorable to the patients and families. Because I'm not trying to help Victor escape accountability, I said flatly. I'm trying to save the facilities and improve care for the residents who depend on them. There's a significant difference. You really hate us that much? Victor's voice cracked with emotion, his eyes meeting mine. This isn't about hate, and I met his eyes directly, my voice steady and clear. This is about competence. You nearly destroyed facilities that have served seniors for decades because you thought regulatory standards didn't apply to you, because Mom and Dad never taught you about accountability for your actions. That's enough. Father struggled to his feet, swaying slightly as he braced himself against the table. You've made your point, Eliza, have I? I remained standing, matching his stance. Because 4 years ago you told me law school was an unrealistic whim. You gave my education fund to Victor because you thought his business ideas deserved support more than my career change. How has that decision worked out for everyone? Mother started crying softly, carefully dabbing at her eyes to preserve her makeup. Nathaniel cleared his throat, his professional demeanor providing a counterpoint to the family drama unfolding. Perhaps we should return our focus to the agreements, he suggested smoothly. The settlement framework has a time constraint. The state's offer expires at close of business today. Reminded them, sliding the documents forward. Victor grabbed the pen first, signing his resignation letter with trembling hands. Father followed his signature, noticeably weaker than I remembered from all the birthday cards and permission slips of my youth. Mother hesitated, pen poised over the paper. Darling, are you absolutely certain this is what you want? She asked quietly. To take control from your brother like this? I'm not taking anything, I replied evenly. I'm earning it. Something this family never taught me how to do. She signed, her face a mask of resignation. Congratulations, Nathaniel said, gathering the papers efficiently. You're now the Chief Compliance Officer with operational control of Winter's Care Facilities. Father slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every day of his 65 years. What happens now? I said, opening my laptop. I start fixing Victor's mistakes, beginning with a full audit of all patient care protocols, a restructuring of the administrative leadership, and implementation of a comprehensive compliance program that actually meets regulatory standards. And me? Victor asked quietly, looking genuinely lost. For perhaps the first time in his life, you'll work under my direct supervision, I explained. You'll learn how to actually manage care facilities properly, not just expand them without adequate staffing or protocols. I looked between our parents and you two will step back completely. No interference, no complaints, no undermining my authority with the staff who still see you as the founders. You're really going to push us out of our own company? Father's voice was barely above a whisper. No, I replied firmly. I'm going to save these facilities and protect the residents who depend on them, whether you like my methods or not. I stood up, gathering my materials. Amber will show you out. I have a considerable amount of work to begin. As they filed toward the door, Mother turned back. Will you at least come to Sunday dinner? We've missed you, Eliza. I have plans, I replied without looking up from my laptop, with people who believed in my abilities when you didn't. The door closed behind them and Nathaniel squeezed my shoulder briefly. Are you okay? Better than okay. I finally looked up, somewhat surprised to find my eyes were dry. I thought this would feel more like revenge, but it just feels like justice. Sometimes they're the same thing, he said with a small smile, ready to show them what you're truly capable of. I Nodded, already pulling up the facility's care records. They wanted a caregiver instead of a lawyer. Well, now they had both, and I was just getting started. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched my family walk toward the elevator's shoulders, slumped, finally carrying the weight of their own choices for the first time in my life. I felt truly in control, not because I'd taken something from them, but because I'd proven them wrong in the most meaningful way possible. 1 month later, the compliance committee meeting starts in 10 minutes, and Amber announced, appearing in my office doorway, "Your brother's already in the conference room and he looks nervous." 1 month into my leadership, and the changes were already visible. Patient satisfaction scores had improved, staff turnover had decreased, and the state regulator negotiations were proceeding productively, but not everyone was adapting easily to the new standards. I gathered my files and headed to the conference room. Victor sat hunched over his tablet, dark circles under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. He'd spent the past month working directly with care staff, learning what quality patient care actually required. "Morning, Victor," the first. "Set my coffee down. Ready for your presentation on the medication error reduction program?" He looked up, startled. "You're really going to make me present the failure statistics myself? Own your mistakes in front of the committee?" "Yes, absolutely." The committee members filed in, a mixture of new faces I had appointed with health care backgrounds, and a few longtime administrators who demonstrated genuine commitment to improvement. Father had insisted on attending despite his doctor's recommendations, settling into a chair at the far end. Mother had finally stopped trying to attend operational meetings. "Let's begin," I said, taking my place at the head of the table. "Victor, please walk us through the baseline audit findings." He stood shakily, clicking through his slides. Each one detailed another shortcoming, another protocol violation, another example of his negligent management. By the third slide, showing medication error rates, he was visibly uncomfortable. As you can see, his voice altered slightly. "The previous administration made several critical oversights in medication safety protocols." "The previous administration?" I interrupted. "You mean you, Victor?" "Own it directly." He swallowed hard. "Yes, I made these decisions. I prioritized expansion over proper staffing levels, which resulted in medication errors that endangered residents." Father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. One of the new committee members, a geriatric nurse practitioner had recruited, raised her hand. "And what specific steps are being taken to prevent these medication errors from recurring?" "Eliza, I mean Miss Winters, has implemented new oversight measures," Victor replied, regaining some composure. "All facilities now have mandatory medication reconciliation protocols, and we've established proper nurse-to-patient ratios on all shifts." Speaking of regulatory compliance, I stood up, transitioning smoothly. "I have an announcement. The state health department has agreed to reduce the penalties in exchange for our full implementation of the corrective action plan and ongoing monitoring." And Victor's role in all this? Father spoke up for the first time that morning. "Will there be personal liability? He'll need to participate in continuing education and oversight training." I met Victor's eyes directly. "But no personal legal action, assuming he continues to cooperate fully with the investigation and reforms." "Thank you," Victor whispered, the relief evident in his face. "Don't thank me," I said firmly. "I didn't do this for you. I did this for the hundreds of residents who depend on these facilities for their care, and the staff who deserve proper working conditions." The meeting continued with quarterly quality metrics and staffing plans. As it wrapped up, Father approached my chair. "A word in private, Eliza." I walked with him to my office, noticing how heavily he leaned on his cane, how much older he looked than just a month ago. Once inside, he sank into a chair with a sigh. "You've done remarkably well," he admitted, looking around at my office. "Better than I ever thought possible." "Funny how that works when someone actually gives me a chance," I replied, unable to keep all the bitterness from my voice. "I deserve that," he acknowledged, rubbing his chest absently. "But watching you lead that meeting today, you reminded me of myself. When I first started these facilities, I built this company from nothing, just like you built your career without our support." "Don't," I warned, feeling my defenses rise. "Don't try to make this into some touching family moment. I'm not interested. I'm trying to apologize, Eliza," he said, his voice strained. "No I countered, leaning against my desk and crossing my arms. You're trying to ease your conscience. You're seeing success and wanting to take credit for it somehow, but you don't get to do that. You don't get to pretend you supported me all along. Eliza, please. He clutched his chest, suddenly his face contorting in pain. Dad, I rushed forward. As he slumped in the chair, my professional detachment instantly shattered by genuine fear. Someone call an ambulance. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway immediately. What happened? His heart. Get his medication from his coat pocket. I knelt beside my father, taking his pulse as Nathaniel searched the coat draped over the chair. Everything moved in a blur after that. Paramedics arriving, the wail of sirens, the frantic rush to the hospital. Mother arrived in tears, Victor pacing the waiting room floor. Hours passed, intense silence before the doctor finally emerged. He's stable, she announced to our collective relief, but he needs to avoid all stress, no work, no business matters of any kind for at least 6 weeks. Mother grabbed my arm as the doctor walked away. Eliza, please come home, help us through this as a family. I gently removed her hand. I'll handle the facilities. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly during his recovery, but I'm not coming home. He could have died today, she whispered, her eyes pleading. And that would have been tragic, I said quietly, but it wouldn't change the past. It wouldn't change who we are or what happened between us. I walked away, my footsteps echoing on the hospital floor, leaving them with their grief and anxiety. Back at my office that evening, I found Nathaniel waiting. Your father? He asked immediately. He'll live, I confirmed, sinking into my chair, care and finally letting exhaustion wash over me. But why doesn't this feel like victory anymore? Because revenge is complicated, he said simply, and family is even more complicated. I stared out at the city lights, wondering if the price of success was worth the weight it now carried, but I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back now. 3 months later, the quarterly numbers are impressive, Meredith said, scanning the report over coffee. 3 months had passed since Father's heart attack. You've turned these facilities around faster than anyone expected. The press seems to think so too, I replied, showing her the latest healthcare industry magazine featuring my photo on the cover. The Reformer: How Eliza Winters Transformed Her Family's Elder Care Empire. Have you shown this to your parents? She asked, examining the cover with appreciation. They've seen it. Mother keeps trying to arrange celebratory family dinners that I won't attend. Meredith set down her cup. How's Victor handling everything? Actually, I hesitated, surprising myself with the answer. He's doing better than expected at the cafe. Shows up early, stays late, actually learns from procedures and regulations. I continued, finding myself speaking about Victor with reluctant admiration. It's almost like he's becoming a responsible administrator. Speaking of Victor, Meredith nodded toward the cafe entrance. My brother stood there, looking more composed and professional than he had in months, surveying the cafe until his eyes found us. He approached our table with an uncharacteristic hesitancy. Can I join you? He asked quietly. I gestured to an empty chair. Curious about this unexpected visit, he sat fidgeting with his tie in an almost boyish gesture that reminded me of when we were children. Victor. Meredith nodded politely, then glanced at her watch. Mind if I talk to my sister alone? I should head back to the office anyway, Meredith said, gathering her things. She squeezed my shoulder supportively as she left. Call me later. Victor waited until she was gone, staring into his coffee cup before finally speaking. I've been reviewing the rehabilitation program proposals you requested for the North Ridge facility. This isn't about work, Victor the first interrupted, studying his face. What do you want? Dad's birthday is next week, he said, looking down at his hands, the first one since his heart attack. Mom's planning a small dinner, family only. He took a deep breath. I know you already told her you're not coming. That's not why I'm here. He pulled out an envelope, slightly worn at the edges. I found this while cleaning out my old office files. It's from 4 years ago. Inside was a letter dated the day after I'd been denied my education fund. My hands trembled slightly as I read. Dear Mr. Blackwood, I'm writing to recommend my sister a Winters for any entry-level positions at your firm. She possesses exceptional insight into elder care regulations and practices and has demonstrated remarkable determination throughout her career. She deserves an opportunity that our family isn't providing. I recognize I'm the last person who should be requesting favors considering my role in recent family decisions, but I hope you'll consider meeting with her. Sincerely, Victor Winters. I looked up, genuinely stunned. You wrote to Nathaniel. I wrote to every major elder law firm in the city, he confessed. Running a hand through his hair. I knew what I did was wrong. I was too much of a coward to stand up to Mom and Dad directly, but I thought maybe I could help in some small way. Nathaniel never mentioned this, I said, staring at the letter, trying to reconcile this act with the brother I thought I knew, because I called him the next day and asked him not to tell you. Victor explained. I told him to meet with you and make any offer based solely on your merit. I knew you wouldn't want my help anyway. He smiled sadly, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. You've always been too proud to accept what you didn't earn. I stared at the letter, emotions warring inside me, anger, confusion, a reluctant grab attitude. I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Why are you showing me this now? Because I'm tired of secrets, tired of pretending. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. You were right about everything, Eliza. I didn't deserve that education money. I definitely didn't deserve to run the facilities, but watching you these past months, seeing how you handle everything from regulatory compliance to staff management to resident care. His voice grew softer. I'm proud to be your brother, Victor. The first I began, unsure how to respond. Let me finish, he interrupted gently. You don't have to come to Dad's birthday. You don't have to forgive any of us, but I need you to know that not everyone in this family doubted you or your concerns. I was just too weak to show it when it mattered. My phone buzzed with a message from Nathaniel. Remember that meeting you've been avoiding with the Healthcare Accreditation Board? They're waiting in the conference room. I have to go, I said, standing up but still clutching the letter. Eliza, Victor called as I reached the door. For what it's worth, you're a better administrator than I ever could have been. The residents are genuinely receiving better care under your leadership. Back at the office, I couldn't focus on the accreditation meeting. Nathaniel noticed my distraction as we walked back to my office afterward. Everything okay, he asked. You seemed preoccupied during the entire presentation. I showed him Victor's letter without comment. He read it carefully, his expression unsurprised. You knew about this? I asked. I knew Victor wasn't as confident in his abilities as your parents believed, he said, handing the letter back. He was genuinely concerned about care standards, just too intimidated by your father to act on those concerns properly. Nathaniel's expression softened. People aren't always what they seem, Eliza, even family. That evening I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had left, staring at my phone. Finally I typed, Mom, what time is Dad's birthday dinner? Her response came immediately, 7:00 p.m. next Thursday. Please come, darling, it would mean so much to him. I stared at the screen, thinking about Victor's letter, about Father's heart attack, about Mother's tears in the hospital, about revenge and responsibility, and the complex web of family connections that I tried so hard to sever. I'll be there, I replied after a long moment, but on my terms. No pressure, no guilt, no pretending the past didn't happen. Whatever you want, Eliza, we just want to see you. I looked out at the city skyline, remembering that angry, determined woman who had walked out of her father's office for years ago. She'd wanted validation, wanted to prove herself, wanted to make them regret their dismissal of her concerns. I'd accomplished all that. Maybe now it was time to prove something else, that success doesn't have to mean isolation, that strength can include understanding, that professional ethics and family ties could coexist without compromising either. But first I had facilities to run and residents who depended on me. The birthday dinner, I stood outside my parents' house holding a bottle of Father's favorite single malt Scotch. The same stone lions still flanked the entrance, but somehow they seemed less intimidating now, mere decorations rather than symbols of authority. Meredith's advice from our phone call earlier echoed in my mind. Remember, you're not that powerless caregiver anymore. You're going in as their professional equal. The door opened before I could ring the bell. Mother stood there, trying to mask her nervousness behind a carefully composed smile. Eliza, darling, you came. The bell in her voice was palpable. I said I would. I handed her the Scotch. Happy birthday, Dad. The study had been transformed. Father's imposing desk was gone, replaced by comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Victor was already They're helping father adjust a cushion behind his back in a plush armchair. Eliza. Father's voice was softer. Then I remembered lacking its usual authoritative edge. Thank you for coming. I took a seat, noting how the room's power dynamics had shifted. No more hiding behind desks or strategic positioning, just family facing each other before dinner. Your father has something he wants to say, Mother said, perching nervously on the edge of her chair. Father pulled out an envelope, his hands trembling slightly. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the heart attack. About legacy, about family, about mistakes. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he insisted quietly. He opened the envelope carefully. This is a letter I wrote to my own father when I first took over the family's small nursing home business. I found it recently while organizing some old papers. Would you like to hear it? I nodded, curious despite myself. Dear Father, he read, his voice growing steadier. I know you think I'm too young and inexperienced to expand the business, but I will prove you wrong. I will show you that success isn't measured by age or tradition, but by determination and vision. He looked up at me. Sound familiar? Why are you showing me this? I asked quietly. Because I became exactly what I fought against, he admitted, folding the letter carefully. I became my father, forcing my children into roles that didn't fit, refusing to see their true potential, valuing expansion over quality. He set the letter down. I was wrong, Eliza, about everything. Victor stood up. We have something for you. He retrieved a polished wooden box from the cabinet. Inside was a familiar document, my original education fund paperwork. We can't undo what we did, Mother said softly, but we want to try to make it right. We've restored the fund with interest. I don't need it anymore, I said quietly. We know. Father smiled, a genuine expression I hadn't seen in years. That's exactly why you deserve it. You've proven yourself beyond anything we could have imagined. This isn't about money, I said, standing up and pacing the room. It was never about money. No, Victor agreed, meeting my eyes. It was about respect, recognition, belief, things we should have given you freely. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen with the latest compliance committee minutes. Notice anything? Father leaned forward, adjusting his reading glasses. His eyes widened. You're recommending Victor for director of operations? He's earned it, I confirmed, meeting my brother's shocked expression. 6 months of hard work, learning from mistakes, actually listening to staff concerns, proving himself. I raised an eyebrow. Sound familiar, Eliza? I don't know what to say, Victor stammered. Say you'll continue to prove me right. Say you'll help me build something better than what came before, facilities that truly put residents first. Mother wiped tears from her eyes. Your grandmother would be so proud of both of you. Actually, I smiled. I have one more announcement. The scholarship foundation I'm establishing in her name for caregivers pursuing advanced healthcare education or law degrees. The education fund money will seed it. Father stood slowly, steadying himself carefully. You're a better person than I ever was, Eliza. No, I shook my head. I'm just braver. Brave enough to forge my own path, brave enough to succeed against the odds, and, well, I took a deep breath. Brave enough to forgive without forgetting. Dinners ready, Rosa called from the doorway as we walked to the dining room. Victor caught my arm. Does this mean you'll stop making me personally check every medication error report? Not a chance, I grinned. Consider it ongoing professional development. At the table, Father raised his glass with a slightly trembling hand. To Eliza, who taught us all what real success and leadership truly look like. And to family, I added, surprising myself, who sometimes need to break apart to grow stronger. Mother reached for my hand under the table. This time I let her take it. Later that night as I drove home, Meredith called. How it go? Better than expected, I admitted. Turns out meaningful reform isn't as simplistically satisfying as revenge, but it's more sustainable. Does this mean you're done making them work to earn your trust? She asked. Oh, I'll still hold them to the highest standards, I laughed, but maybe, just maybe, we can build something valuable from the foundation we're salvaging. I pulled into my driveway, looking up at the stars scattered across the night sky. The angry, frustrated caregiver who'd fled her family's dismissal was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, more complete, someone who understood that true power isn't found in destroying what hurt you but in transforming it into something better. The facilities were improving, the family was healing, and I was finally truly free. Not because I'd won some victory over them, but because I'd grown beyond the need for victory at all.